Good morning. Uh, I just wanted to get up here and state into the record that there is no reason to believe that there will be any or much, there will be much to anything, or any upside to the economic pain that has been triggered by Donald Trump's tariffs. There's a whole crowd of people who honestly believe Trump, and you're a gullible lot, who has lost your ability to think critically about things in order to understand why that is not the case. People they think, US manufacturing is going to come back to the United States, but in listening to just about anybody that knows what they're talking about, you're not going to be able to build a factory within a year even. It's going to take years to rebuild to build one at all. It won't come back for that long if it does at all, and then after that you could create college courses, because the days in which you could hire workers to work the factory without a college degree are also gone as well. People have to be trained up to do the jobs and the work in the factories at this point, so that it have to be college kids that were doing the fucking work, which means you have to invest in the colleges to train the people in how to do it. And then on top of that, you have to buy all the fucking machines to put in the fucking factories, because we stripped ours off and sold them when the waves of globalization started in the fucking 80s, 90s, and early aughts. Like, it's been 40 fucking years of globalization, and by now, like, we've fucked ourselves. That's you know what I mean? Like, there's so much that would have to be done to resurrect it at this point that, it's just not gonna it's a fucking non-starter. Okay, now I will allow for the possibility that there are a few anecdotal examples and just individualized, isolated examples of companies that will reshore their manufacturing in the United States here and there, as a consequence of this. But those are the companies that, for that well, basically they're the ones that, they're going to be fine if they bring some of it back home, and yet they don't. The tariffs expire at some point because Donald Trump is out of office, or dies in office and yields it to somebody else power wise. But I mean, basically, I mean, to define what success would look like and what it's not going to look like on this front, I would say that real success would be making, the United States bring back the glory days of 1970s, US manufacturing, when, we manufactured it, when you had like millions and 21 million or more people working in the manufacturing industry, and those days are gone for good, you know. And back then, those jobs were not thought of as pleasant work, to say the least. I mean, it was not not a glorious job that everybody thought very highly of people working in. But now it's like that's what everybody wants, because they were paid, at a rate that people could basically get by on that kind of lifestyle, in these economic conditions and everything. And so, like, uh, I just, the dip, well, I mean, the upside here and the upswing is for us. We took this opportunity to buy into the market. We bought shares of Apple, Exxon, Amazon, Nvidia, and Microsoft. We bought in at this point, so we're now holding yeah, as a family unit, basically some shares of the company, or will be by the time the market's open today, in our portfolios. And so we're gonna be we bought in, because there's blood in the streets right now, and it was a chance to buy in at discount. And that was really the only real upswing here when it came to the tariffs. I mean, there, or like, basically what I'm saying is that you might get a few companies, but that's not really what success looks like. Success would be creating millions and millions and millions of jobs in US manufacturing, so that all the people that fantasize about working in a factory could end up with a job in the factory. And the reality is the overwhelming majority of them are never going to find factory work, no matter how much they pine after it. Like, I haven't gone over the reasons, but the reason is essentially that automation isn't what it looked like in 1970. Really, it isn't even what it looked like in like the early aughts. It's come light years by now, and that if you open a factory, it's not so much that the robots will be augmenting work at this point in the factories. They'll have replaced like three-quarters of the work. And so you'll need some workers to work a factory if we build some here, but you won't need as many as we did in 1970 to put things together. You'll need vastly fewer workers because the factories will be highly automated and everything. And yeah, you probably need somebody to service the machines when they break down every here and there and such. But you don't need as many people involved at all anymore to keep a factory online and in producing. So, this idea that jobs are going to come back in the factories at any kind of meaningful scale and everything, and you're going to be able to work in one it's a pipe dream. It's a fantasy that's never going to happen. Donald Trump likes to talk a lot, about things and make extraordinary claims, but he's been full of shit for a long time. The things that he says, just, I mean, this is a guy that complains about the fact that like windmills kill birds, and it's like, yeah, but have you looked at charts of the fact of like wind of bird deaths by energy source? It's not really about eliminating the birds being killed. It's about reducing the number of them. The whole problem with windmills is that they're so wind turbines is that they're so clean that you don't in some respects, if birds get killed by a smokestack of coal, it's not as gross when somebody has to go in and scoop them up, the bodies, and usually they happen and they fall out of the sky in uninhabited areas, so nobody notices. But when you have a bunch of dead birds by the turbine, somebody's job is gross. They have to go in and clean that shit up. That's awful. I feel bad for those people, but that doesn't negate the reality that we've basically reduced the bird deaths as a result and consequence of those turbines going up and replacing dirtier sources of energy. So I get why people would complain so loudly, but Trump, the reality is that far more birds died the way we were doing things than the way that things are happening now and everything. Trump likes to talk. He likes the sound of his own voice. He likes to you know what I mean. He likes to pontificate and brag and talk about how great this is going to be. And the reality is that a lot of what he does is sell people on fantasies and pipe dreams. I mean, I hate to. The part of what sucks is that like my chosen role here is to to walk the path of truth, to give people like the disturbing truth about things and the discomforting truth about things and the uncomfortable truth, basically. And that's what Donald Trump sells. He's a merchant of comforting lies. That's what he's produced for a very long time. And he's pulling your chain. He's telling you these tariffs are going to pay off, and that in the long run there's going to be a big upswing because we're going to bring back manufacturing. And it's like, yeah, maybe to some extent, but not at any kind of scale. Like, I'm allowing for the fact that maybe a few companies that you know can bring manufacturing back here and won't be absolutely dependent on tariffs remaining in place forever will come back. But overall, you're just not going to see a big wave of it. And you know there are some people that will basically be satisfied with any upswing at all, and that there have been some jobs brought back at all, and say I'm being too pessimistic. But you know, I think what Donald Trump really wants you to believe is that you're gonna get a job in manufacturing yourself, and the the reality of, that, for most of you is that's not going to happen. Sorry.